What do you imagine when you hear the Arctic? Huge blocks of ice, snow-covered hills and plains with polar bears, whales, seals and walruses. But what if I tell you that very many regions of Russia belong to the Russian part of the Arctic, which anyone can visit with no trouble at all? A geographical discovery for those who, like me, were geography bored at school. This is the Russian Federation. Yes, imagine. And all of these areas are the Arctic part of Russia. I decided to go over there, to Teribirka, the utmost point of Murmansk region, ends of the earth washed by the Barents Sea spilling into the Arctic Ocean. I started my trip with a flight to Murmansk, the world's largest city inside the Arctic Circle. The climate is quite severe here. Even the end November welcomed me with an unexpectedly unpleasant -20 frost. The most difficult thing was to have time to film everything I wanted to, because in winter the true polar night sets in and the sun remains below the horizon. And the summer brings the polar day, preventing locals from sleeping well. At the end of November, the daylight hours decrease by about 20 minutes every 24 hours. Thus, during my week there, the day shrank from 3 hours to 1. 1 light hour a day. God knows how the people lived there. It made me very sad, especially by the end of the trip. So without any loss of time, straight from the airport, I set off for one of the largest monuments in Russia, the Alyosha, erected in honor of the defenders of the Soviet Arctic during the Second World War. To be honest, the monuments are the only sights here, and the train station, and monuments. Oops, I've heard of that somewhere before. 9 places out of 10 are the monuments, plus the railway station. So, what I am talking about? Alyosha got his name after a song of the same name about a monument to a Russian soldier in Bulgaria. Alyosha stands on one of the highest hills in Murmansk and overlooks the Kola Bay from a height of 200 meters. So it is visible from far away, from almost anywhere in the city. The point gives an incredible view of Murmansk and its surroundings. But in winter it is quite foggy here, which makes it difficult to enjoy the beauty of local places. Nevertheless, the port is still visible in the distance amid the severe northern country. There, at the first shooting spot, I tore up several fingers while unsuccessfully grabbing the landed b-boy.
Вот что бывает, если схватить дрон рукой неаккуратно.
After symbolically sprinkling the Alyosha's pedestal with my blood, I drove to the next unusual site, the Lighthouse Memorial, in memory of sailors who died in peacetime. The monument is less than 20, and in this short time it has become one of the symbols and the most important landmark of Murmansk. This lighthouse isn't used as intended. It is still low and very far from the shore. Nevertheless, the true light and sound equipment for signals was installed there. Nearby, a fragment of the crew cabin of the sunken nuclear submarine Kursk can be found. Indeed, it is the most suitable place for this notorious exhibit. Behind the lighthouse, there is a true ship's anchor on the concrete base under which a seawater capsule is stored. This complex is seated on a hill, commanding the clear view of the city. Of course, if it's not covered with haze or fog. There is also a church called the Savior on the Waters, which is built very close by. Since I couldn't find anything interesting about it, I suggest we take a mere look. No comments. It's beautiful, isn't it? However, my most beloved monument gently concealed itself on the opposite end of the city. I'm referring to the monument to Semyon, a striped fluffy cat who traveled more than 2,000 kilometers back to his owners.
Холодный замерзший котик, покрытый снегом.
The cat, who was accidentally lost on a trip, traveled from Moscow to Murmansk for more than 6 years, and it was decided to immortalize his deed in this beautiful monument on a bronze bench. To be honest, I was expecting to see a lot of people waiting to be photographed with a 120-kilogram cat, but on the side I had a hard time finding one girl passing by to take a picture of me. In the meantime, the light day in Murmansk ended hastily, and in the darkness I ran to the main, to my mind, local museum. Frankly speaking, I confess that I hate museums. None over them, absolutely. But I was bound to come here, because the main museum of Murmansk was the first Russian nuclear-powered icebreaker, with the symbolic name of Lenin. Scheduled excursions are held several times a day. You can't go in and have a tour by yourself. So, after half an hour freezing in the local cold, I finally came inside. Truly, because of poor lighting, many shots have janky lamp flickering. Sorry, I could do nothing about that. The first room is the wardroom. Some, probably important, meetings are held here nowadays, but all the furniture and furnishings in general are kept as much pristine as possible. Frankly speaking, I listened to the guide half-heartedly, because first of all, I was too keen on filming, and secondly, please forgive me, I know absolutely nothing about nuclear-powered icebreakers. One of the really interesting facts I remembered was that an icebreaker doesn't split the ice with its snout, but crushes it with its considerable weight. It crawls on the ice and breaks it. However, there are some restrictions. The ice shall be less than 2 meters thick, otherwise even such an iron machine will not be able to break it. In order to plot a safe course, a special person on board determines the thickness of ice blocks by eye. According to the guide, it is incredibly difficult to master these skills, and I believe him. The icebreaker has very many small rooms closed for visitors. The entire corridor is strewn with doors. Many of them has warning signs. Anyway, I was able to examine several cabins and the medical post, wherein the icebreaker's operation period not only for the crew was treated, but also people from the most remote regions of Russia, who needed urgent surgeries and had no way to get to a doctor. A total of about 300 surgeries were performed here, and 2/3 of them were performed on civilians. Moreover, the medical post had a dental room, but no dentist was on board during the expeditions. Sailors with affected teeth were disallowed. So why is it here? Then we visited the deck house, and I even twirled the mini steering wheel there. And then we went into the icebreaker's main control center. The vessel has circa 700 sensors, constantly analyzing some data and displaying them on the control panel here. Afterwards, we were even allowed to see the nuclear reactor, although at the moment it was disassembled and was now operational. And it used to be, by the way, nearly the most important part of the icebreaker. The icebreaker becomes fully self-sufficient and sails for several years without entering any port. Lenin was the first testing platform for all nuclear fuel producing and replacing technologies, so it could stay offshore for about a year. Today's icebreakers require refueling only every 5 years, which is undoubtedly impressive. Yet, in total darkness, I went to see the northernmost McDonald's in the country. Why just see and not eat some unhealthy burger, you might think? Well, they wouldn't let me in without a QR code. That was too bad. The short northern light day had long ago ended, and the bus leaving for Teribirka, the very edge of the earth, was waiting for me. There I would spend the next week in anticipation of an extremely interesting natural phenomenon, the northern lights. However, I had a long way to go, and even somewhat dangerous. It was due to the severe northern climate and very unpredictable weather. The only road to Teribirka had been permanently blocked by snow several times in the week before I arrived. An unexpected and heavy snowstorm happened to make cars got stuck in the snow and they had to turn back. And on such days, the road was often closed and no traffic was allowed at all. I didn't know what would I do if I suddenly got stuck in the snow halfway to the village. So I decided to take the bus, and not for nothing. Because on the way to Teribirka, the bus stopped. We were stuck in a snowdrift. And the driver was trying to get out for about 20 minutes. Then people started pushing the huge bus in an attempt to help, but I just stunned and didn't have any time to take any shots. Then the driver called for assistance, and some untrustworthy tractor came to the rescue.
Мне даже интересно, как это будет выглядеть.
The bus was tethered to the basket. The tractor backed up, and they finally pulled us out.
Неужели мы поедем?
And then we dragged after the snowplow for a few more kilometers at the speed of a pregnant turtle. But the main thing was that we made it. Yeah. Now I think I understand why the Teribirka Sentry, the eternal guard being constantly changed by tourists, stays on the access road to the village. Although in the dark, the sentry looks more like the death because of its scythe. The snow-covered car has been standing nearby for years. Someone probably never made it to destination. No one knows what happened to the driver, since the car was left here forever. Actually, two settlements located 5 kilometers apart are called Teribirka. One of them is the old village of Teribirka itself, and the other is a newer settlement called Ladeyne, which is where I got after a 3-hour bus ride.
А где домофон? Его здесь нет.
That's it. I need a sleep.
Привет. Я в Териберке. Я доехала через много-много приключений, и наконец-то я здесь. Даже охрипнуть успела уже, потому что холодно. Очень холодно.
The next day I woke up at about 11 a.m. and seeing from the window the sun coming out over the horizon, I rushed to shoot the sunrise. However, this decision was one of the funniest fails of the trip. After waiting about 30 minutes, It seemed to me that the sun had barely moved. And yeah, it didn't seem to. Because of the very few daylight hours, the sun just refused to rise high to a beautiful sunrise. And after the week in Teribirka, the polar night set in there. On December 1st, the day I left, the sun didn't come out for the locals to stay in darkness for long, long months. Although there is one very good thing about it. While it's still light, the sky is constantly colored in all shades of red, pink and orange. You can call it an eternal sunset rise in winter, really atmospheric and beautiful. At the beginning of the trip, I still had a few light hours to film and see the local sights, if I could call them that. On the first day, I went to the stone beach named Dinosaur Beach. Dinosaur grrr. It's a matter of large round stones which are strewn all over the beach. The inhabitants of Teribirka thought that they looked like dinosaur or dragon eggs, so the beach was named accordingly. It seems to me that all this looks cooler in summer, as in winter almost everything is covered with deep snowdrifts and the stones are visible only inside the surf reach. The sea. Just look at the incredible color of the water. That day, standing on the shore and staring into the distance to see the ocean, I felt the real power of nature. The roaring and cracking waves, the wind blowing over the feet, the steam coming off the water due to the considerable temperature gradient. I was a little afraid to launch B-Boy in such conditions, but he made it. 2 or 3 kilometers from the stone beach locates the Teribirka waterfall, one of the most Instagrammable sites in the village. The deepest snowdrifts make the walk there not very easy, and the locals can drive you over these measly 5 kilometers for 1,000 rubles per person. 1,000 per person. 5 kilometers there and 5 back. 1,000. Okay, you got it. Gobsmacked with the local rates for all things I'll tell you later about, I went on foot.
Волны просто обалденно. Очень сильный ветер. И вообще холодно.
Только что была метель, но теперь она закончилась, и появилось ясное, чистое, красивое небо. Только посмотрите на эти облака.
The feeling of being told that the waterfall was very close was inexpressible. It was well worth the effort. I was lucky enough to see the waterfall unfrozen, although with a few frozen icicles. The shooting was a big challenge, because the steep slopes made it dangerous to even get close to the edge. In the end, I somehow got a foothold on the ice surface, stuck my rack in the snow and constantly held it with my hands to keep it from falling into the waterfall along with my camera and my dreams of being a travel blogger. But it was definitely worth the effort, wasn't it? There is no denying the beauty of the northern nature.
Я думаю, что надо делать так.
Кто-то даже пьет воду отсюда. Холодная?
Да.
Ну не так, чтобы прям уж совсем. Зубы? Не знаю, мне вообще прекрасно.
In fact, I was in the vast winter tundra, with its magnificent snow-covered hills and plains. Indeed, the weather here doesn't spoil people at all. Just a few minutes period can move things around. The sky is clear, but suddenly black clouds come out of nowhere, and you feel happy with no rain at -20, only snow. And super strong sudden snowstorms causing zero visibility are the frequent occurrence. Several times I was caught in them, but luckily they ended as quickly and suddenly as they began. There was nothing else to look at in the new Teribirka, and generally it was quite dull. Little sun, steady sea wind, and only 2 stores with super expensive food, and nothing else of entertainment. The only curious things I had shot were the cars overgrown with snow, and the local church resembling an ordinary house with a cross put there by some decision. I couldn't get inside because it was locked, but had a pinned leaflet with a schedule of services. The church was operating in spite of its appearance. Anyway, the next day I went to the old Teribirka, which was about 5 kilometers away. No chances the locals would give me a ride, but other tourists were happy to help and pick up a lonely and freezing hiker. The rates for the only traveler necessities, transportation and food, are simply exorbitant. For example, to drive these miserable 5 kilometers from one point to another may cost 1,000 rubles. Have heard the numbers, haven't you? So I sat on foot. In fact, you can do without a car. The distances are walkable, but -20 in winter discomforts you. On the way, I came across this so-called graveyard of lost ships. However, barely it was a graveyard, there were few old boats abandoned and decaying. In the summer, they are completely visible at low tide, and many people even get inside, despite the forbidden sign stuck next to it. This place is more interesting from above. I had barely finished filming and put my equipment in my backpack when an incredibly heavy snowstorm came out of the blue.
Погода на севере меняется невероятно быстро. Еще минут 10 назад было солнечно и все нормально. А сейчас пошла такая началась метель, что даже не видно, куда идти. Надеюсь, я иду в правильном направлении. А то, блин, снегом заметет, кто меня будет откапывать потом. Такие они северные путешествия пешком. Ура! Териберка! Я почти дошла.
As I said, the weather here changed very rapidly, and in 15 minutes it calmed down as if nothing had happened. The clouds parted to reveal a pink sky, and I didn't see a single snowflake. When I finally reached the place, I immediately set off for the deer farm, and in my opinion, this place was the most interesting there. The owner, or the reindeer, keeper, lives here in a small but very cozy house with a real Russian stove. I came to it several times to get warmed during my filming breaks, and even got to know some Americans who had come for 3 days hoping to see the Northern Lights. I liked the reindeer very much. They were quite tamed, although they didn't particularly like to be stroked and no fed. The funny thing is that looking at them cost 100 rubles, and buying food for them 200 rubles. But if you want to give this food to animals, not to chew moss by yourself, you will have to pay 300 rubles. Be that as it may, it is worth it, of course. The owner even offered me to get a ride into the deer pen and volunteered to shoot video with my camera. Following a super short lesson on how to use a DSLR camera, I went to my new antlered friends and almost immediately tasted those very antlers. The deer were terribly rogue. They didn't attack, of course, but they were hungry and raced to my basket of food, pushing me with their antlers. Suddenly, an antler got caught in my hood, which the deer didn't like. He started shaking his head, and I could do nothing and was wiggling back and forth in time with his movements. I screamed in shock, thinking the owner would help me, but he grew into his role as cameraman and just kept filming. Well, that's okay, as I have some of that content. All in all, reindeer are perfect deer, seriously. Their fur is not very soft, but very thick, and they don't have any upper teeth, so it's okay to feed them. When I heard that, I even wondered whether all reindeer had no teeth or just these. Everyone had no, as I found. By the way, there was another deer in the neighboring pen, completely white and without antlers. Frankly speaking, I thought it was a cow at first. Not in fact. Deer shed their antlers since the wildlife is practically undangerous for them in winter. And they grow back very quickly, about a centimeter a day. There were also many huskies, which could give you a ride, but I appreciated just watching them.
Off. Конфликт интересов. Убежал Бобик.
In general, Teribirka, especially the old part, is quite sad. There are a lot of abandoned houses right on the main street, and if you walk a little further, even more will appear. But the special atmosphere is created by the new cottages, probably for rent, and the general cheerful liveliness of tourists. Too many people for such a remote piece of land, in my opinion. And on New Year's Eve, crowds of people are expected wishing to see the Northern Lights, so early December isn't even a full house yet. You can also go to the sandy beach here and see a true old ship, not the dilapidated wooden boats like in the graveyard. I was even lucky to get a shot of it without tourists after waiting quite a long time. It is also possible to swing on huge swings right on the seashore, but you may have to wait in line for a long time, and I didn't feel like standing there in 20-degree frost. so I did with just filming. In fact, not even walking and just being outside can make you cold, but shooting something and blogging. For example, I really froze my fingers during a 5 minutes drone control.
Вот так отмерзают пальцы. Белые становятся.
And ran to warm them in a restaurant called Tereberka Coast. Actually, I wasn't going there, because I was not a fish and seafood eater, just don't like it. And then what's the point of going to a place with only fish menu? However, I was told that they did venison there. Now we were talking.
Ну что, смертельный номер, пробуем оленину. Неплохо, но похоже очень на печень.
It was already dark when I went to the last place I wanted to visit, the abandoned school. I had to look for the entrance, because it was on the backside of the building. Some tourists didn't bother and climbed right through the broken windows. Well, it was not an derelict building. All valuables, or at least burning materials, had been taken out long ago, but it was fun to wander there in complete darkness. And now, the most important and interesting thing I came there for, just like absolute majority did in winter. My main goal was to see the Northern Lights. The first few days I didn't get a wink of sleep, very much worried whether nature would be merciful to me, whether the issue would be completed, or it would remain unfinished like a book with the last page torn out. By and large, the Northern Lights are an almost daily phenomenon. But the point is that the higher the solar activity, the brighter they are, and the better they are seen. Clouds contribute a lot as well. If the sky is overcast, you won't be able to see even the brightest northern lights. Special websites can approximate sun forecast for the months ahead, but cloud cover is much more difficult. It is almost unpredictable, and even the locals of Tereberka are far from forecasting accurately. The solar activity was okay, and the sky was a disaster. The whole week I was in the village, they promised cloud overcast weather. Nevertheless, I still went out and walked to the beach in the hope that the wind would blow the clouds away and I would see something. The owner of the hostel where I was staying was a great guy, and every night he would go out on his own informing me of northern lights. So, on the very first night, he went out and he said, "Look, look at the lights!" Puzzled, I turned my head and said, "Where shall I look? I see nothing." And he pointed to a pale grey strip on the horizon, which could be easily confused with a moon-illuminated cloud. All I could think at that moment was, is that it? Really? This thing is the lauded Northern Lights? Yes, it actually was. I checked the sky for the lights with my phone. I have a folder of sky pictures. When I take a picture on a slow shutter speed to distinguish a cloud from the sky. It was badly seen on the first day. But I took out the camera, made some settings, and actually got some pretty good shots of green streaks across the sky. There was very little sun activity that day, and I, getting frozen up, quickly went home thinking that the lights were poor. The second day was totally unsuccessful. After waiting outside for about an hour, I didn't see any northern lights at all. In short, I started to think how to tell you about this natural phenomenon when the real view is very different from the colorful photoshopped pictures on Instagram. It was especially funny to recall an internet article where locals allegedly complained that the northern lights disturbed their sleep. My foot! It only disturbs your sleep if you're traveled a couple of kilometers away from home to watch it. So, having decided that it couldn't be any better, I went out quite reluctantly on the third day. The only joy was the solar forecast promising the brightest lights. I got to the beach, waited a while, and then people started getting out of their cars and yelling.
Мы видим северное сияние!
Блин!
Ура!
Круто!
Только посмотрите на него!
Все небо, оно прям, блин, круто!
Вау!
The lights must be them, but I could see them only a couple of minutes later. No idea of how they managed to notice them before that. Honestly, watching the lights in the company was more funny. I saw adult men and women roaring, laughing and jumping for joy.
Ха-ха-ха! Ура!
Such an atmosphere makes you shouting and giggling either. At that time, the lights were really well visible, without all the gadgets like iPhones and DSLRs. They shimmered slowly in one place and then in another. Of course, they were very far from the bright Instagram pictures. That day, I made my first time-lapse shooting, and it was incredibly beautiful. It was really in the sky, unbelievable. Waiting for the lights on the beach made me feel bitter cold, and after an hour I was already running home with a feeling of duty fulfilled and thinking of a cup of tea to get warmed quickly. It is difficult to shoot for the lights without a car, especially in winter. In Teriberka it can be seen from the end of August, so hikers like me should go in early fall to feed the sight. I had the last day left, when the lights forecast was just fantastic. On the top, a perfectly clear and cloudless sky was expected night long. But when I left the house at 9 p.m, all I saw was a dull streak that was gone 30 minutes later. I came back over the hinges, but decided to go out again, closer to midnight. And suddenly, after being informed that it was shining all the way even in Murmansk, which was extremely rare because of the luminous pollution, I ran outside and was dumbfounded, barely looking up. I could see the lights even above my house, despite the light of lanterns and windows. And when I walked a couple hundred meters, I saw the finely colored sky, and I couldn't take my eyes off. Everything shimmered. All the lights were just everywhere. Flashes, streaks, sprawling patterns. I was at a loss what to shoot to have the most beautiful pictures.
Это нечто. Что-то с чем-то. Все небо переливается. Везде. Оно ползет, пульсирует. Это вау.
The lights were incredibly bright. I even saw many pink flashes I had not seen in the previous days. They were moving very fast, right on the air. The sky flashed green lights in various places. It was amazingly beautiful. It was gorgeous. I thought I had seen good lights before, but that day satisfied all my hopes and expectations. The true northern lights, which makes me want to laugh and shoot with joy, running back and forth with the camera in my hands. I stood and watched this unique phenomenon open-mouthed. This sky disco was indeed very reminiscent of the pictures and time-lapses I had seen so many times. The locals said that these lights were almost the brightest of the year. Just look at them. I stood outside in -20 for 3 hours straight. In the end, I was very cold, and jumping or jogging gave no effect. Finally, I pushed myself packing my camera and running home not to catch cold. And when I was rushing, the lights were burning and painting the completely cloudless sky. The true northern lights. Thanks for watching and bye-bye.